Welcome to Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Rabbi Tovia Singer's Let's Get Biblical Q&A, coming to you from the Holy Land. Rabbi, the man Tovia Singer, welcome back, sir. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah, big pleasure.
Very good. You know, I was thinking that it was really just right off the wall. I was looking, I've got you on the great big screen right here on my right side. And it was like the first time I've actually had you on the big screen inside my studio where I can see you clearly. And you've got like the smoothest skin I've ever seen. You have the skin of a baby's face. I'm like, that's some good stuff right there. No joke.
Look, if you would have stayed out of the sun, you could have had the same.
Is that your thing? Because instead of the sun, you went for underwater.
Yeah. I know. I stay out of the sun. That's the whole deal.
Nice.
Yeah, you stay out of the sun, then you have this kind of skin.
Hey, when are you going scuba diving again? Yeah, is what I want to know.
Yeah, when I go scuba diving, you wouldn't believe this. So when you go scuba diving, so you're wearing a wetsuit, so you're fully covered, right, except for your face. And but what I do is I have a bandana on, like a full face covering, or a thing that people who rob banks, like a face mask, but I fully covered.
Gotcha.
Because typically when you're diving, you're in, I dive only essentially in tropical waters. I'm not interested in going to Antarctica. Right. So I'm covered with head, and I have a hat like that covers me. So all that's showing are my eyes, totally covered. And then the moment I'm like 1 second before I go in, I take off the bandana and the hat, and I slip it into a pocket in my BCD, and then throw out my mask and immediately immerse. Immediately. And the reason I do this is not because I'm trying to maintain any cosmetic effect. It's because my skin reacts so to the sun that I don't, I've never tanned in my life, and I don't burn. I fry. I go up like a Roman candle. So I cannot be exposed to the sun. It makes me extremely uncomfortable. And the doctor once said something to me that I thought was fairly straightforward. We were sitting next to each other on a flight to Israel, and he said, if something hurts you, your body is telling you, don't do it. And if you're in the sun and you're very uncomfortable and it's causing pain, like your body is saying, stop doing it. There's actually a disease where there are people who don't feel pain. So if you feel pain, this seems so, when you feel pain, if something hurts, your body is saying, stop it. It's an amazing thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts in our body that if something smells bad, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that way. Yeah. Why should it smell bad? It means either your sister-in-law cooked it and she can't cook, or it means that you shouldn't eat it. It means Hashem made it that way. So, to me, when I'm out in the sun, like sun, I get very, very uncomfortable. Like, I really, direct sun, especially in, anywhere where there's tropical water, I'm covered completely. I don't go out. Or it's the indoors air conditioner on. So that's what I do. I cover completely. So that's why I don't. If I ever didn't, it would be terrible. And especially here in the Red Sea area, which is desert. There's not a cloud in the sky. There's nothing to obstruct the direct sunlight. So for me, it would be catastrophic to be exposed. So there it is.
If you ever notice,
that's how it's done, my friends.
Vampires have really good skin complexion too. So, are you from Transylvania by chance? Just kidding. Bad joke.
Yeah, my last name is Dracula. No, I'm from anywhere. It's hard to tell.
We'll call you Count for short. the Count Tovia. That actually has a good roll off. You know what I mean? Count Tovia.
It's not. I don't. I appreciate there are people who like to lie in the sun. I get it that there are people who appreciate jazz. I get it. I trust there are people who get a kick out of watching ballet. I don't get it,
Same.
but I recognize that there are things that I don't appreciate that other people do. Or there are people who like to watch baseball and don't care about what the outcome of the game is. I don't understand why people are interested in watching sports. I don't get that. Unless you care about who's going to win. Like if it's the Jews against the Christians, that's the game I want to watch.
That's a game I definitely want to watch.
That's a game I want to watch. Like if you don't care about the outcome, I'll just say this. The only thing that really blew my mind away is I remember years ago lecturing at Duke University. I've lectured there many times. And one time they got me tickets to go to a Duke game, and I had like amazing seats. I don't remember who they were playing, but I was like in the 5th row because, I was the speaker. I was a big shot, blah, blah, whatever. And if I tell you I had no clue what's going on at that level of basketball, at that highest level of college basketball, I, first of all, saw people. I didn't know people come in that size. And they were doing things that I didn't think was humanly possible. I thought that the laws of physics were being... I just saw... If you're watching on television, you can't understand this. When you're there and they're close, you see things that people are flying, and it's not that they're coordinated. It appears that what they're doing is superhuman. The level, the athletes. So, but I don't normally watch it. You know what? If it happens, I happen to be somewhere. I don't. But going to a baseball game, did I ever go to a baseball? I don't think I ever did. But watching it, it's like watching grass grow. It's fine if you're into it. Bless you. I don't. Now, how does a pitcher throw a ball 100 miles an hour over a plate that's, I don't know, 60 feet, whatever way? I don't know how they do that. It really is quite a thing. But I have no time for that kind of stuff.
Right.
Doesn't interest me. Bores me to death.
Well, I do know what interests you, and that'll be this question we're going to round off here. So let's go ahead and get this baby rocking and rolling. Good to have you back, Rabbi. Thank you all for tuning in. Good to see a big crowd out there today. And so we'll go ahead and move right on into our first caller. You're live on the air. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, William. It's Steve from Brooklyn. We see that there's missionaries all over Israel trying to missionize people, trying to dress up as Hasidic Jews and pretend. Well, we've just had a situation here in Arizona, in Phoenix, where a father-son were exposed, and they did all kinds of rituals. Wrote a Sefer Torah scrolls now have to be destroyed, and they wrote tefillin, and they wrote mezuzahs, and they were on the kosher board. They did the ritual for the dead. Unfortunately, we in America always react to things. Always one step behind 9/11 or one step behind Pearl Harbor. How do we prevent, what kind of early warning system would the rabbi suggest that we here in America put in place? A system where we don't question every new person that comes in and create a Salem witch hunt and, create some sort of, McCarthy Red Scare. But how do we protect ourselves as an early warning system? What are the dead giveaways that a person is a missionary? How would we ferret one out? That's my question. Thank you.
All right. Well, very good. Go ahead and hang them now. Tune in for your answer. Yeah, I meet people like that from time to time. I almost had to get another rabbi at the time involved because I wasn't sure how to handle it. It's pretty interesting how they just sneak in. They'll go so far even to the point of denying their faith. That's what I don't get.
Built into the question is the answer. The question was, here we're talking about now the Dawsons, but they changed their name to Michael the Isaacson. So you have Michael and his wife Summer and son Kalev. And the question is, people just show up in Phoenix and pretend to be Hasidic Jews and writing Torah scrolls and writing ketubos, and how do you know? So built into the way that question is asked is the answer. The answer is they didn't just show up. These covert missionaries, and this is a cancer going on not just in the United States, it's going on here in Israel. You saw the El Cohen case, it's all over the place. And this is a stage 4 cancer. So the problem is ensconced, buried into the question. The question contains the answer. Because these missionaries, the Dawsons, Michael Dawson, son, Kalev Dawson, who look like Hasidim, look like they would be in Meir Sharm or Borough Park. They look perfect apart. They're doing all the kind of, they didn't just show up in Phoenix and say, hi, everybody. If they had, that question would be a legitimate question. I know you, Steve, thank you for the question, but in fact, as it turns out, these people were uncovered more than a decade ago. These people these are missionaries, okay? Michael and Summer, these are missionaries. They were doing their stuff already in Israel going back 2009. The evangelical Christianaries who are, of course, using Jewish symbols, icons, traditions in order to lure Jews into the church who would otherwise resist a straightforward Christian message. This is the whole Messianic movement. The whole Messianic movement is an evangelical sect iteration of Christianity. Do not believe the line that, oh, we are going back to the Hebrew roots of the Christian faith of the followers of Yeshua. Don't buy that. Messianic movement is a modern iteration of Christianity, fully loaded doctrine of the Trinity. There's no theological distinction between what the Messianic movement believes and what a Southern Baptist Church and Assemblies of God Church believes. It depends if they're charismatic or not. They're just misappropriation. It's a game. It's dealing from the bottom of the deck. So the Dawsons show up in Phoenix, and they don't show up like a day before. They don't just show up in Phoenix. They start out their career in terms of infiltrating covert missionaries. We know for sure, going back to 2010-11, they show up in Portland, Oregon. And in Portland, they were recognized. They engaged in some activity of Jewish evangelism. In the Portland Jewish community, there were people who converted to Judaism, meaning left the Messianic movement, left Christianity, recognized them. This is going back to Portland. This is going back to 2009, 2010, 2011. And then they just, when they're confronted, they admit to who they are, what they believe, and they skip town. The family skips town and goes to Dallas. They show up in Dallas and then manage to convince rabbis there that they're Baalei Tshuva, means they're not religious Jews, always portraying themselves as Jewish, but we're not religious Jews, and we'd like to redo the wedding and have a Jewish ceremony. So the rabbis in Dallas, they're want to help a Jewish couple out, and they manage then to obtain a ketubah, a Jewish wedding contract. So that's now their next stage of evidence that they have that they really are Jewish. Does this sound at all familiar to you? And the places where they're going, and these are people like, by the way, you trace them back and go back to Seattle. You can, same place where they're all coming from, doing the same thing, trying to obtain documents somehow, some way to further support that they're actually Jewish. They aren't. The research was done. And then in Dallas, they skip town and show up in Houston, home to the largest Jewish community in the state of Texas. And then with a ketubah in hand, they managed to infiltrate the Orthodox Jewish community to a level that's unimaginable. Now, all this time, the rabbis back in Portland are warning everybody, these are missionaries. These are people who are completely not Jewish. Emails are sent out, forwarded. People are getting their heads up to the point that the Dawsons are able to Michael Dawson is able to be the senior supervisor for the Orthodox Kashrut Agency in Houston. He's running the show. He's the senior supervisor. Could you imagine that for Kashrut? And he and his son, they're reading from a Torah scroll. They're involved in also blowing the shofar. They are all over the place in Jewish practice, and all of it's not kosher, all of it's treif, all of it's fake, all of it. Dressing up completely like utterly religious Jews. You would never know that these people weren't even Jewish. It just would never occur to you, even though so much research is done. Beinin has done amazing research on this, dug up their weddings, their actual real weddings announcement that goes back to a Lutheran church. The family is not Jewish at all. The Jewish Chronicle in England did research interviewing family members of Michael Dawson, and the aunt admits completely these people are completely not Jewish. There's no Jewishness in their family at all. I mean, does this sound familiar? So the answer to the question is just pay attention. There is an enormous difference between if somebody shows up who appears to be Jewish and you're asked to count that person for a minyan, for a quorum in a synagogue, to slaughtering animals, to being a supervisor in kashrut, to reading a Torah scroll. In Jewish law, you have to certify that these people are known to be Jewish. And to slaughter animals, to be a shochet, a ritual, that person requires an enormous, it's an enormous, very high bar, very high standard that a person has to pass to be able to be a shochet, a ritual slaughter. It can't just have any person do it, and it can't be an irreligious Jew. It has to be someone who is known to be not just a Yir Shemayim who fears heaven, but is very knowledgeable in Jewish law and in Jewish scriptures and Jewish sacred literature. So this is not the question. If someone shows up at a synagogue and just wants to pray with everyone, that's not the question that's being asked here. The question that's being asked here is, to perform a tahira. That means this family, meaning Michael Dawson, who's going to go on to change his name to Isaacson, and his wife, Summer, changed her name to Chavi, they're performing the tahira on the dead, which means that after a person passes away, prior to their burial, the body is washed and so on. There's a series of traditions that are carried out, rituals that are carried out for the dead. This is a highly sacred area. You can't have people who are not Jewish performing this, to perform a tahira. So, and you've got all this evidence going on. You've got people pouring in, telling you, "Hey, these people. How did that ever happen?" This is so. We're not really asking the question if someone walks into a synagogue, do you suddenly start doing genealogical checks? No, but to reading from Torah, blowing shofar, signing on a divorce certificate, being involved in any way in performing a Jewish get, that's the most serious thing of all. That's the most serious thing of all. Because if Christians write a get, sign on a get, the divorce is worthless. It's nothing. Do you know what the consequences of that is? That's much worse than writing a marriage contract or being a witness on a wedding. That, I mean, even though this is all shocking, the divorce thing is the most zechamur ma'od. This is the most serious matter, because you allow a missionary to be involved in a divorce certificate, being a witness to a divorce certificate, signing on to a divorce certificate, and the couple then believes that they're no longer a couple. The woman then assumes correctly, she's correct to assume, that she's no longer married, and then she marries another man, she's an Ashes Ish. That's adultery. And then, but she doesn't know. But then if she has a baby with that new husband, that child's a mamzer. You know how serious that matter is? This is earth-shaking. If you're not blown away by this, then nothing will blow away. So what I'm trying to explain is that, yeah, if the Dawsons now, Isaacsons are, running shchita or running a hechsher agency in Houston, that's pretty serious. But the consequences are that you have to make your utensils kosher, and some things can't be made kosher, and you may wind up throwing away your dishwasher and dishes. But now we're talking about very, very serious crimes, very serious. So that's the problem. The problem is people weren't paying attention. People were ignoring the massive amount of evidence that was coming through and just allowing this to go on. So this is a very serious problem. And then what emerges in Phoenix, it kind of goes under a little bit. And in Phoenix, that's where it becomes crazy. Because in Phoenix, by the time they get into Phoenix, the Dawsons already changed their name to Isaacson. So they kind of are off the map. They're off the radar as Dawsons. Now they're Isaacsons, a very Jewish name. And, thankfully, Beinenu, a very important organization, receives a tip on their hotline alerting them that the Dawsons are now the Isaacsons, and they're working at a synagogue run by a man named Michal Aminov, and they're running everything there. This thing, that's what you're hearing about. So in Phoenix, they're running everything, doing it all. They're involved in writing ketubot. They got conversions. They're so involved in conversions in Phoenix that in Phoenix, this guy, Aminov, was charging $10,000, $20,000, as much as $50,000 for conversions. For conversions, it was a whole business that Aminov had going on with the now Isaacsons, who are really the Dawsons. Could you imagine that? In fact, they were encouraging the community of Phoenix that, bring in your ketubot, your marriage certificates. We want to check them to make sure that they're kosher, and if not, we'll fix them. And of course, they were just rendering them not kosher and rewriting them, charging whatever. And they're ensconced in what's in the Bukharian community. The Bukharian community is a community that really comes from Uzbekistan, which was a former Soviet state. It's a unique community, an insular community. So they were using that as a complete cover. And these guys look totally Jewish, but they were doing everything there. So now you got people who are Lutherans who ran through the Messianic Movement, who are running the whole show, the whole game, slaughtering anything they slaughter. In Jewish law, there's no difference if you eat a pig or if you eat meat that was slaughtered not properly. That was slaughtered by a non-Jew, let alone a missionary. We're not going to talk about that. Not kosher at all. There's no difference in Jewish law if you eat horse meat or if you eat a chicken that was slaughtered by a non-Jew. It's the same exact thing, identical. People think there's a difference, you're making a big mistake. Okay? So now, it is important for you to know that you might think, well, this is a bunch of strange people. We have all these guys. We got Buckles, we got El Cohen, we have the Dawson/Isaacson. This is some sort of anomaly. It isn't. These guys are going to be, it's from that group of names I just mentioned that's going to produce the Rabbi Kaduri document. claiming that Rabbi Kaduri, a great sage, actually said that he believes in Yeshua and Jesus. We covered that on the show years and years ago, and I exposed it then. That's the Seattle group. It's this whole petri dish of it. But don't think of this as some sort of weird case. Don't. If you do, you're making a very big mistake. The idea of casting yourself as Jewish and behaving Jewishly when trying to evangelize Jews goes back to the Christian Bible itself. The earliest surviving Christian canonical documents are the letters of Paul. Paul routinely engaged in this sort of behavior, portraying himself as a Pharisee, not any Pharisee, a Pharisee of Pharisees. Paul explains explicitly in his letter, not just any of his letters, but those letters that are indisputed in terms of its authorship. In 1 Corinthians, no one questions whether 1 Corinthians was actually written by Paul. It's indisputed. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20, 21, 22, read it for yourself. Paul says, this is what I do. I mean, these guys didn't, the Alcoans and the Buckles and the Doors, they didn't make this stuff up. Paul says, this is how you do. This is how you do your evangelism. To the Jew, I become as a Jew, that I may gain the Jews. If I'm not going to Jews, but rather going to people who are not under the law, non-Jews, so I become as one who's not under the law. I can become all things to all men, that by some means I may gain them for Christ. Paul says that I am completely chameleon. Whatever it takes, the ends justifies the means. You just dress up and do up and whatever it happens to be, and whatever the motivation of the person is for evangelizing, boastful, whatever it is, whether in pretense truth, the gospel is preached, Philippians chapter 1, verse 18. I mean, this is not a new idea. I mean, the modern Messianic movement, as we know, I mean, literally the term Messianic movement and having Messianic congregations essentially begins a half a century ago. In its most modern iteration, begins in basically early 1970s, when evangelicals sat around in Western Switzerland trying to figure out how are we going to bring the Jews to Christ. After all, Jewish evangelism had been just a massive failure. And they realized that Jewish people are very uncomfortable about converting to Christianity because many Jewish people are very proud of their Jewish identity and don't want to convert to anything. They don't want to leave their Jewish identity, their cultural identity, even if they're not religious, but I'm proud to be a Jew. Born a Jew, die a Jew. And that's where they came up with the idea that when you become a believer in Jesus, better, Yeshua, you're not converting to another religion. Oh, no. You're becoming a Messianic Jew, a completed Jew, a fulfilled Jew. It's the most Jewish thing you can do. Yeshua was Jewish. The disciples were Jewish. The synagogues in these cities, in Dallas, I mean, the big Messianic congregation in Dallas, it's not like it's like a Temple Israel, young Israel. It's like really Jewish names, like Baruch Hashem, big congregation. So the key answer to you is that when people tell you stuff, listen very carefully. A disproportionate number of the people who are converting to Judaism today, and the numbers are huge, they're coming through the evangelical Christian world. It's a very large, very significant segment of those people who are joining the Jewish people are former evangelical Christians who have some background relationship with the Messianic movement. And when they get involved in the Messianic movement as a non-Jew, eventually they go, it's totally Christian. I mean, it looks Jewish. They're using Jewish symbols. They're using Jewish liturgy. They're lighting Jewish, but there's in substance, It's all Christian. There is no theological difference. And the pastor of my Messianic congregation was trained in Moody Bible Institute, in Dallas Theological Seminary, in Philadelphia College of Bible, and Houston Baptist. I mean, need I say more? These are all...
Right.
So what happens is that these people then decide that they want to join the Jewish people, and they are done with Christianity completely. When these people warn you that the folks who are now in the community, we remember them in the Messianic movement, take them very seriously.
Rabbi, you mentioned earlier red flags that are being missed. Could you mention a few of those, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure, of course. When people are coming into the community and asking for new documents, they don't have them. Ask questions. When people are portraying themselves in a way that just doesn't make any sense, it's vital to take a closer look at what they're saying. If they're seen in the Messianic congregations, that's an enormous red flag. Pay careful attention to that. But again, the standard here is if people want to be involved in reading the Torah, blowing the shofar, performing circumcisions, involved in Torah, in being a sofer, a scribe, and so on, that bar has to be raised very, very high. I want to, by the way, make a point here. I am very grateful to Bukharian leaders, rabbis, who have recently, when I say recently, I'm talking about in the last 100 hours, come out with declarations saying that this Michal Aminov from Phoenix, that none of his conversions are valid, that none of his what he did with slaughtering is valid, none of the circumcisions he performed valid, none of this is valid. So I'm very grateful for that. But pay careful attention. Don't ignore what people are telling you, because all these cases were known to people, but people somehow went silent, went quiet. And when a Beth Din from another city, when leaders of another city are coming to you and letting you know that, don't ignore that. Pay careful attention to these things, and it will. Thank God. I mean, they passed through Milwaukee, and thank goodness that the Beth Din in Milwaukee took these warnings very seriously. Did research, did due diligence on researching the Dawson family, and and the Dawsons, did admit to them that they believe in Jesus and they weren't going to change when confronted. So that's what we're dealing with here.
Right.
So look at the way the Milwaukee Beth Din, that means a Jewish court, handled this. They handled this superbly, but unfortunately, this was ignored along the way. And then you have the case of Aminov in Phoenix, and other rabbis in Phoenix were very, very, and I'm putting this mildly, very, very uncomfortable with that whole so-called synagogue that Aminov was running, and certainly wanted to distance themselves from it. But it really did require this massive explosion of information to be released, so that finally, people would stand up and say, okay, what Aminov is doing. And one other thing about this, if someone's charging huge money for conversions or training you for conversions, run away. Okay? When a person undergoes conversion, there's not really a charge for that. Now, a Beth Din will ask for, a Jewish court will ask for whatever, $500, $600, $700, if you can afford it, just to defray the cost of running the Beth Din and so on. Very minor amount. But when you start getting people who are mentoring for fantastic amounts of money and offering conversions for $10,000 and so on, run from that kind of stuff. Leave skid marks. That's a very, very bad sign. Because there's there's no real there's no charge for joining the nation of Israel. So when you hear those crazy numbers running around, so you know it's a factory, and that's what was going on in Phoenix. It's a factory. I mean, stay away from that. That's a huge sign that something smells horribly when they're running around redoing your mezuzahs and ketubot, charging all sorts of ridiculous money. Just run away from that. When it's a factory, just run for your life. Get away from it.
Okay, so just one final, just want to take you a minute. I've heard a lot, I won't say most, but I've heard a lot of stories where, certain rabbis do charge a little bit of money. Maybe it's a couple grand or something like that. Is that something to be alarmed about as well?
No, I mean, for what?
For conversion. Like $2,000 or $3,000 for, spending the 3 years of getting them converted.
Performing the conversion?
Well, just I just heard people say they're converting,
I've never heard of a legitimate Beth Din charges to.
No, actually, no, a rabbi at a synagogue.
Let me clear this up.
Okay.
No Jewish court should be charging in $1,000. That doesn't exist. If they're charging in $1,000, that means it's fake. It's false. Stay away from it.
I'm thinking it's
definitely not going to be accepted. And one other thing. Check out and make sure that this Beth Din is recognized by the state of Israel. If not, the conversion is not going to be accepted anyway. So
I was thinking it wasn't the Beth Din that was doing it. It was actually the shul itself that they're going through for the training, whatever rabbis for whatever shul they're at. I'm not sure, but I know I've heard about it quite a lot. So
it should not cost thousands of dollars. A person could have a tutor or someone that helps, or they may hire. There are people who go through a conversion process, which, let's say in an Orthodox synagogue, where it's a real conversion, would generally be a 2-year process. And during that time, the people join the community within walking distance of the synagogue, and learn about Judaism, are given books to read, to study, and then go attend classes. That stuff should cost money. Now, if a person hires a tutor to say, please study with me to prepare me for conversion, for the conversion process, because you don't have to be a scholar to convert to Judaism, but you have to have rudimentary knowledge of the Jewish laws and Shabbat. I mean, no one wants to convert someone and then they're thrust into the Jewish people and they don't even know what to do to keep Shabbat.
Right.
So listen very carefully. If you are hiring a tutor to teach you about the Jewish faith in preparation for conversion, so that person says, look, if you want me to teach you, I don't know what it is that people charge, but whatever a normal rate is to teach, so that's normal. But now if you decide that you're going to hire a person full-time, I don't know, 5 days a week for 8 hours a day, I don't know, you're just hiring somebody. So what a person could charge, and there are people who will charge, of course, understandably, for their time to mentor. They're not performing the conversion, but they're simply willing to teach Judaism and willing to prepare you for the conversion process. So sometimes there's no charge for it all. People volunteer to do that. But there are people who will, charge a reasonable fee, just an hourly rate of just to teach, and that's completely fine.
Okay. All right, good deal. All right, well, we'll go ahead and move on to this next caller. Caller, I apologize. Just also check out. I mean, if you're dealing with who does and so on, make sure they're not. Hey, Rabbi, can you hang on 1 second? 1 second. I'm getting really bad feedback, and I can't hear what you're saying. I don't know where it's coming from, but I know it's on the Skype channel that I'm talking to you on. Can you got a little echo in the background. Do me a favor, hang up real fast and call me right back. I need to disconnect Skype and recall again. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I was getting some serious feedback and I couldn't figure out what it was, and I didn't want you to miss out. And now I can't see where it's called. There it is. Okay, I might have to call him back. Actually, that didn't work. Let's go here. 1 second. Bear with me, please. There we go. This ought to clear it up. Okay. Something's gone really bad with our connection audio-wise.
You hear me?
I can barely hear you, and I hear a really weird sound.
Check my settings.
Okay, sure. You can even switch mics if you want to. There's still a chance it could be on my side, but I've never experienced that before, so I don't know. I don't know what this...
Experienced it quite a bit. All right, so... you experienced that a lot.
You know what? Yeah, every time you tap that, the static gets louder. It's not really a static, it's more like a humming buzz. So when you tap it, it gets louder each time I hear it. It's like it's amplified. That static is amplified.
I'm going to just switch mic.
Okay, that sounds good. Take your time. All right, guys, while we're at that, if you haven't gone there yet, go to OutreachJudaism.org, and you can find his 2-volume Bookshed. I know you see the CDs on screen. Those are not available. They're out of print. The content is very much available. When you go to OutreachJudaism.org, you'll look for the free audio tab at the top. Basically, I think there's 23 or 25 sections to these CDs. I'm trying to put the cursor where you can see it, but it's not actually working. So there's all these sections are labeled according to the chapters also in the book. It's not an audio book. Don't mistake that. It's extra information. The books were basically based on that information. So everything that's in the book is extra juicy stuff. So if you don't have the audio files, you're truly missing out.
One thing I might as well...
I hear you better now, by the way.
You hear me better now?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, there are the hardcovers are out. They've been updated, and those are available on OutreachJudaism.org. It's been quite a few years since hardcovers are available. When I say updated, don't go and get it just because.
Right.
But the hardcovers are out and available on OutreachJudaism.org.
Awesome. Very good. Okay, I don't know where we were talking about something. I didn't want to leave out anything important you were talking about, but I don't remember. I got so distracted by that sound.
No, we're all good.
Okay,
we're all good.
All right. Oh, really? And our caller just hung up. It's okay. We used to have 2 or 3 callers back to back. Guys, the number is on your screen: 855-952-4253. Definitely call in with your questions. And Andrea, thanks again, and all the people out there who's actually in YouTube land moderating all the chat. And really appreciate all that. So Larry Beck. Oh, here we go. Got a caller. All right, I think we got. All right, we are back. What's going on, my friend? Welcome back to the show. What's the question for Rabbi? Rudy, you can hear me?
Yes. How you doing?
Hey, doing good. Welcome back. What's the question for Rabbi?
Good. So I still have a question about Jeconiah, the one that he was cursed by Jeremiah that his children would not sit on the throne. There's a thought in Judaism that someone would sin only if madness comes upon them. That's one thing. The other thing is that the age of accountability. If it's a child, I think he was like 8 years old when he was declared prince, and about 18 when he became king. His frontal lobe is not developed yet. And I understood that children and young people are not held accountable for their sins prior to the age of 21, let's say, till they actually develop. How is it that Jeconiah was held accountable for the sin as a youth, as a young person?
All right. Great question.
Okay. Thank you. You can go to hang up now and tune in for your answer, okay? Rabbi, could you just kind of reshape that for me, please?
Sure. In Jeremiah chapter 22, the prophet condemns Jeconiah. Jeconiah was one of the last of the Davidic kings. He did not last very long on the throne. Some of the things he did were unspeakable crimes. and he was condemned. And specifically, he was condemned that none of his children would ever sit on the throne of David. So the text says, it's in Jeremiah 22, verse 30, that none of his seed will sit on the throne of David. Okay? And as it turns out, the person that replaces him is his uncle. So it's the next king avoids that curse, and it goes to the uncle, meaning his father's brother, and everything is set right there. Now the question is, how is a king who's young held accountable? So at this point, Jeconiah is not 8 years old any longer. So when a person becomes king at that kind of an age, so at that there's always a co-regency, which means someone else is acting as king because the person is too young. This happens. And then when the person becomes of age, so then the person takes over and becomes king. So Jeconiah was, as you said, was fully an adult. You know, I thought if you would ask about kings who are young, we have people who are much younger. King Solomon began his reign when he was 12 years old, and his reign continued for 40 years until King Solomon, blessed memory, was 52, the author of 3 volumes of Tanakh, right? So as it turns out, Jeconiah by far didn't reign as young as many other kings were when they began their malchus, their leadership, and they certainly were held accountable. The things that Jeconiah engaged in was so grotesque that he could no longer be king. He was carried away by Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, and strangely, very strange thing, I'll just tell you an interesting thing that happened with him. Strangely, he repents in Babylon. Strangely, he's put into a dungeon. His wife is given to him in prison, but his wife was not in a state of purity. He could not be intimate with her and refused to. And it was in that merit that he was released from prison. It's a very interesting thing. And he does tshuva, he repents in Babylon. He does not ever never returns to become king again. But as it turns out, he does quite a repentance when he's far away from home. And I tell you this because Tanakh is very interested in telling us about the worst cases, not the mediocre cases. Tanakh is interested in showing us most extreme cases, people who do tshuva, like, for instance, Menashe, as an example, repents. His repentance is mentioned in the Book of Chronicles. But Jeconiah was not 8 years old when that wasn't the case at all. That's just, technically, people could become a king when they're children, but then you always have a case of a co-regency where somebody else acts as king until they're a proper age where they can actually rule. And that was the case with him. If he was not responsible for his actions, in Jeremiah, who became a prophet at the age of 15, Jeremiah would not have cursed him in that fashion. So great question. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, my name is Jimmy, calling from Alabama.
Okay, I'm having
Can you guys hear me okay?
a difficult time hearing you there, so we're going to move on to the next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hi, yes, my name is John from California.
John, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Yes, I had one question that kept bothering me, and I don't know what to make of it. I think I called in like a long time ago and asked, but I had 2 questions, and this question got mixed up with something. But if God created a pair of animals, or like a male and a female of each animal, where was the snake's partner in all of this? Did the snake have a partner, or not?
That's interesting.
Because I heard a rabbi say that.
So let me answer that question. The answer is yes. The Torah very specifically tells us, doesn't tell us that God created only one serpent or any animal. God filled the world with animals as he filled the seas with fish. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, we're told in the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created male and female according to their species.
Okay.
Yeah, but I heard you say, Rabbi, that a snake wanted to be with Adam. That's why it made Eve eat from the apple or something like that.
Right. So what's your question?
That, and where was its partner?
Let me rephrase this for you. Okay, let me reframe this. But thank you for your question.
Okay. Go ahead, Rabbi.
The question is really, what was the serpent's intention? Now, certainly the serpent represents the evil inclination. We're going to call him Satan, even though that's not in the text, but let's just say that he represents the evil inclination in some way. Okay? What these events that are part of the record of creation are so familiar to us. We're so acquainted with them since childhood. After all, this is the record of creation, of how we even got here. That as kids, we learn these gripping events, we learn about the record, but because we learn them as children, we don't often ask the adult questions, because we're so familiar with them that sometimes it's that familiarity that prevents us from thinking any deeper. And the question is, from the Torah's perspective, what exactly was the Nachash, the serpent, what was his motive? So because Genesis chapter 3, verse 1, when we're introduced to the Nachash, where it says, "Va'nachash haya arum mikol chayes hasoda asher asa Hashem Elokim," because the serpent was more cunning than any other creature that was in the field. And that's how we're introduced to him, that we don't sort of dial it back just a little bit and try to figure out what bothered the serpent. Why was he involved? What was the motive? Like, give me a motive. Like, he just seems, when you read the text, to be a malevolent creature that just pops out of nowhere, and he's just causing an enormous amount of trouble. And here's what the Torah wants us to focus in on. Adam, just prior to this, is introduced to all the animals, all the creatures, and recognizes that none of them are compatible for him. He names them according to their character, and then ultimately is in despair that he doesn't have a companion. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu then, from Adam's body, produces Eve. You all know this. Here we have a creature who is among the creatures that Adam encountered and said, "I'm not compatible with you." Now, think about that for a moment. Is the Torah trying to tell us that, like, Adam looked at a hippopotamus and went, "I don't think so"? That he looked at a rhinoceros, "I don't think this is going to be a good shidduch. This is not a good match." Giraffe, "No, I don't think so." I mean, is there any person who thinks that those animals were a real candidate for Adam, to be his helpmate, to be his spouse? Does anyone dream that? And it's a question I think we don't consider enough. However, here's our caveat. What happens if there was among the creatures that Adam encountered that were passed before him who had some very striking features? Number one, highly intelligent. In fact, not only highly intelligent, but the most intelligent animal. There was no creature that was as intelligent as this animal. Okay, we're not done yet. This animal could walk around. Okay, let's take it further. This animal could talk. You can have a conversation with this animal. We're not done yet. This animal had exquisite taste in food and was a connoisseur of food. Now, we can directly see this from the curse that comes later, that everything will taste like dust. That means that prior to that, this creature walked, talked, highly intelligent, and appreciated good food. What are we hearing here? What's coming through about this animal? It would be difficult to identify what is it about this creature that distinguishes it from a human being. It's walking upright. You can hold a completely intelligent conversation with this creature. This creature is extremely highly intelligent and enjoyed really good food. What we are encountering now is if any creature could have been a candidate for Adam Harishon, for Adam, this would be the creature. In fact, you would be hard-pressed to come up with what the disqualification is. Why is this creature not a human? Is this creature, if there was a court case presented in your country where it had to be decided, is this creature entitled to human rights? Right? Animals are not. There are prohibitions, there are laws about causing suffering to animals, but they don't have the rights of humans. If you had to present why this creature is not entitled to the benefits of human rights, you'd be hard-pressed to come up with something about the Nachash, why this is an animal and it's not human. Do you understand what's going on here? This is so magnificent. And so marvelous. It's so pow. And that Adam Harishon, Adam rejects it. Says you're not human. What is it about this creature that is not human? Because if you think about what is the difference between a human and the world, the animal kingdom, I think you would say, well, humans are highly intelligent. I know people talk about my dog is so smart, but no one ever said my dog does my 1080 and my cat does my tax return. I don't care how smart your pet is. Okay? It's not in the same deal. Okay? So how would you define a human being? Listen carefully. I'm asking you a question. Listen very carefully. If I asked you, what are the criteria that defines what a human being is and how a human being is different and distinct from any other creature? What are the characteristics of a human being that set it aside and place it in a completely unique category than anything else? There's just nothing else like a human being. What are those criteria? I am sure you would say highly intelligent, have the ability to have conversations, to speak. There is no other human being, no other creature on earth that could speak like we're speaking. They can make noises and dolphins can clack at each other, but they're not talking. No one else can talk. The koyach hadibur, the power of speech, is unique to human beings. That's what you would say. Humans could speak, and it's innate. The ability to write and read is not innate. But the ability to speak is completely, we're hardwired to speak. We know that. Humans are hardwired to speak, and in fact, when as children, just starting from year all the way up to whatever 5-6 years, we are so wired for speech that we're able to pick up languages at that age, in that window of time, that we will never be able to replicate again. So the power of speech is innate. We are hardwired for speech, not writing, for speech. It's an amazing thing. In fact, when people hear a speaking, if they're familiar with the language, they don't even, there's no spaces between the words. You can look at a readout of language on a screen, and it's just that. Our brains actually separate out the words. That's why we hear a language you're not familiar with. It sounds like they're speaking so quickly. Walking upright and appreciates really good food. This sounds like a human being. If you miss this, you're missing it all. So then what is the difference? If you have to judge, if you're sitting on a court and you have to judge, this creature, walk, talk, highly intelligent, loves great food, Your Honor, how is this creature not entitled to human rights? What is it about an animal that makes it an animal and not human? What is it? Think. The belief in God, the secondary thinking, the ability to consider something but realize that God is speaking to you and you're creating the image of God. And therefore, your behavior can be guided by the divine, can be divided by the divine, and impulses can be repressed because it's wrong. There is no animal on earth that believes in God and ever did. Never. And therefore, we understand the argument of the snake with Eve. When the serpent makes the argument to Eve of why she should think about eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, she says, God said, and he says, what if God said? That's not where we in the animal world are guided by God said. We are guided by our impulses. We are guided by what we're hardwired for. There's no other voices. Dogs know to bury a bone, it's just hardwired. Even if they never saw their mommy, and if a dog never saw his mother and father bury a bone, it somehow knows to do that. And animals know it. Cats know to clean themselves off, even if they're orphaned. They know it. They're hardwired for it. And there's no secondary thinking from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, it's true that animals can adjust their behavior based on experience. So they encounter something that ultimately has either a benefit or a trauma or a pain or whatever, so it knows not to do that again, for sure. That's how animals are trained. But there's no talking from God. There's no voice from God. There's no neshama. There's no chelik mimal mamish. There's no part of the divine. And that's what the serpent is trying to convince Eve. What God said is not what guides us. Oh, if what God said doesn't guide us, then you're not human. And that's where it comes into our language, in our idiom, is you're behaving like an animal. It makes no difference what language you speak. When you say to somebody, you are behaving like an animal, whether it's in French, in English, in Hebrew, in Spanish, in Chinese, in Japanese, it doesn't make a difference what language. It's never a compliment. And it always means one thing. What does it mean in whatever language you speak when someone is told that you are behaving like an animal? Are you conveying that you can't speak? The answer is no. See, what I'm conveying to you is that you actually knew the answer. When you say to somebody that you're behaving like an animal, you're saying that you have a low IQ, that you're not intelligent, that you would not do well in a Rorschach test? No. Are you conveying a person's posture and if they're able to walk upright? No. Behaving like an animal in every language conveys the same message. You're following after instincts rather than considering the voice of God. I say, but they're atheists who behave in a certain way. And because atheists are imitating religious people and they've adopted religious ideals. If the world is completely materialistic, then there's nothing intrinsically wrong with any behavior. No, they copy us. That's fine. So that is what means you are behaving like an animal. But God said an animal doesn't even know what you're talking about. If you could speak dog, if you could speak to your dog and say to your dog, don't do this because God said not to do it, it's not that your dog would disagree, it's your dog would have no idea what you're talking about. The atheist knows what you're talking about, and he may protest belief in the divine. Fine. But he knows what you're saying. The dog wouldn't know what the heck you're talking about. We do not behave and adjust our behavior based on what God says. We do it based on how we're hardwired and based on information that we accumulate in our lives. This is beneficial. This food is really bad for you. This smell is not good for you. And if you behave badly, your owner may, make you sleep outside. You may miss dinner or not, or you get a biscuit if you do. So that's just learned behavior, but it's not coming from God. If you could speak to your cat, if you could, and you explain to your cat that this is a sin, that God doesn't want you to behave this way, it's not that your cat will or will not listen. We all know exactly what the cat would say. Say, what is God? I don't even know what you're talking about. That is the Nachash, and that's the conversation between the Nachash and Eve that is so built into chapter 3. God said, don't touch the fruit or don't eat from. What does God say? What is that? How does that play into this? That's the animal speaking. And what Adam and Eve needed to do at that moment is listen to the voice. Adam in particular, who hears this directly from God. Listen to the voice of God rather than your impulses, and that's what guides animals and not God. And therefore, if we could take that away from these events, what we're looking for is the motive. That means, why is the Nachash, the serpent, unhappy? Because the hippopotamus never stood a chance. But the walking, talking, intelligent connoisseur of food, definitely, if anybody did, that's the one who did. Disappointed? You bet. The only one. The rhinoceros wasn't going, how did I blow that date? How come that dinner didn't go well? It was nice, the thing was setting. So that's the answer to your question. Thank you so much for joining us on air.
All right, very good. We may have time for one more question. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hi, my name is Tony. I'm calling from Tampa.
Okay, I'm having a really hard time hearing you here. We'll try it again. Go ahead.
My name is Tony, calling from Tampa.
Okay, caller, I'm very sorry. I think you've called in before, and we've always had a hard time hearing you on this line. I don't know if you're driving or if you're on a mobile phone or if there's high wind. I'm not really sure, but it's really difficult hearing you. If you can, call us back again from a landline where we get a little bit better connection. It'll be a lot easier for us to take that call. So, Sorry, guys, not being disrespectful, but it's really hard to hear that line. So, all right, we'll go ahead and take this next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Steve. I'm calling from Pennsylvania.
Oh, Steve, welcome back.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I had actually wanted to play maybe devil's advocate, like
Sure.
to go back to earlier what the good rabbi was saying regarding Paul and Corinthians, and you could go to a missionary and say, well, I know what you're doing. The ends justify the means. You're doing the same thing as Paul. And suppose the missionary would go, no, this comes from the Torah. In fact, this last week's parsha, when Jacob, took the blessing from Isaac, when he deceived him, and so we're just to play devil's advocate. What if they were to come back with something like that, saying, no, we're not getting it from the New Testament, we're getting it from the Torah. Look at what Jacob did to Esau, and
Sure.
even Abraham saying, Sarah's her sister. I believe Isaac did the same thing. So what if they take it? I can't imagine it getting to that level, but what if they were to come back with that, saying, no, this is not from the New Testament, this is from the Torah?
That makes sense. I mean, because that would be a good comeback in that case, Rabbi.
Right.
Okay, we'll go ahead and hang up now, Steve, and thanks for calling back, and you have a good day. Thanks for calling.
Thank you so much. God bless.
You bet. Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So the first one, the first example, that's the point, that it really was not a good idea to handle things in that way. It wasn't a good idea for Jacob to handle acquiring the firstborn status in that fashion. And it is exactly for that reason that in Genesis 32, Jacob is going to have to deal with an angel who's really an overseer of Esau, and struggle with him directly. That's exactly the reason. The reason is that prior to this, it wasn't direct. Now, Jacob will purchase the firstborn status from Esau immediately after Abraham dies, but it really wasn't a good idea. And the consequences are far-reaching. And that is why the struggle that Jacob has with his brother continues. And that's why the Torah repeats it. So that is an excellent example of how not to go about doing it. The other example is different. The other example is of a completely different origin. So in the case of Abraham saying that Sarai is his sister, so technically Abraham wasn't completely lying because she was his niece. Abraham, if we dial back, marries his brother's daughter, so it's kindred folks. And people do say, these are my brethren or my sister when referring to family. In fact, today, it's rather conventional to people refer to even people who believe the same thing to call them brothers and sisters. But in Abraham's case, it really was very, very close family. They were very closely related. The other point is that Abraham's life was in danger when Avimelech could have killed him. And so therefore, in a place when your life is in danger, you certainly can do that. I would hardly give Elcohen, Dawson/Isaacson, Buckles, and all the rest of these characters a free pass because Abraham didn't want to get killed. That was, in fact, it's explicitly in the text that the king will kill me and keep you alive and so on. And therefore, to save his life, he had to do that. So that was And in fact, as it turns out, God comes to Avimelech, who is not a particularly righteous king. He's not as bad as Pharaoh is, but he's not the best person in the world. But God intervenes and explains to him, you've got to get this woman out of your house because it turns out she's Abraham's wife. And he gets her out really quickly. And Hashem did that in order to preserve Sarah's dignity, that someone who was ill-equipped to be a prophet experiences prophecy in order to save. So in that case, Jews did lie about their identity in Hungary in 1944, and in April of 1944, if you were a Jew living in Budapest, you said whatever was necessary not to get on a train to Auschwitz. That would certainly be the case. That would be permissible. So those cases would not be a good example because you are permitted, if your life is in danger. There were many Christians. Now, when I say there are many, that means there were thousands of Christians who lied to save Jewish people. Now, the vast, vast majority of Christians in Europe didn't and were complicit directly or passive. They were complicit in the Holocaust. But there was a woman, Corrie ten Boom, who was a Christian, who saved Jews and had to lie to save Jews. For whatever reason, there were Catholic priests in Poland. There are not many of them. But there were some who saved Jews and lied to save them. And the Jewish people are very grateful to them for lying about hiding Jews, about the identity of Jews. There are very few people like this. But there is in Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum here in Jerusalem, a garden set aside to honor the righteous among the nations who risked their lives and lied in order to rescue Jews during the Holocaust. That would be fine. That would not only be fine as in neutral, like not bad, that would be a good thing to do. As it turns out, very, very few people in Europe has saved Jews, and that's the story. That's a big part of the story of the Holocaust is that so many were silent, including Pope Pius XII and all these other wonderful individuals. But we are very grateful to the non-Jews who lied and saved Jews, and Jews who had to hide themselves and somehow survived in doing that. I've met quite a number of people over the years who've done that. So that would be fine to save your life, to say that someone's your sister when it's in fact your niece. But again, in the case, you can see that Abraham said, well, actually, it's not completely a lie. She is a sister in the sense that it's a very, very close relative, and that's how we speak. It's not a unique thing. In the Torah, it's a frequent talk about these are your brother, your sister, and it's not an actual sibling. So great question.
Yeah, even in the counts of the kings and stuff, where it says, he's listened 8 generations down, it says son of David. It's not his son. It's like his great grandson, but they still call him the son of David. So similar, right?
All right.
Okay. All right, Rabbi, can we squeeze in one more call?
Sure.
Okay, cool. All right, caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from. I think I know who it is, as long as I got the right number. Gigi, you there? Hello, hello, hello. Caller, you're live on the air. Oh, she's been waiting for a while to catch this call, too, so. Caller, one more time. You're live on the air. I've got you on hold. Well, actually, you're not on hold anymore, but we certainly can't hear you. I'm going to give it just a second. So, yeah, it's been an interesting past month or two for sure. So, how are we looking schedule-wise coming up? Pretty good? Anything surprising coming up before we're going to be...
No, we're all good.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. All right, one more time, caller. Live on the air. Please tell us where you're calling from. If this doesn't answer, we're going to go ahead and hang up. I told him earlier, so I went ahead and hung up. I told him earlier that we may not be able to get get the call in because we were cutting close on time, so they may have actually just laid the phone down and walked away. Not a problem, though, folks. Not a problem. So, well, it's been a good show, good questions and everything, and so we'll look forward to seeing you again, Rabbi, same time, same place next week, Hashem willing. And we thank you all for being patient. Even last week I was out of town for the weekend, so it's good to have you back, Rabbi, and good to see all y'all back as well. So y'all should have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Take care, Rabbi.
Look forward to it.
All right,
Be
thank
well.
you. Thank you, you too.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד. חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה.